It's no good, Fred. Either we're still too far out to pick up their homing signal or the radio's gone haywire. I don't know which.
At the rate we're losing fuel with all this blasted circling, I'd say our chances of finding the island are less than 1 in 1,000 without those signals.
Crazy, isn't it? We come almost all the way around the globe without a single hitch. And now, here we are, circling a patch of ocean for hours, looking for that refueling stop as if it were a needle in a haystack.
It may as well be. A South Pacific island we can't find that's supposed to be less than 3 miles long and half a mile wide, and a Coast Guard cutter with the unlikely name of Itasca parked offshore sending us homing signals we can't even pick up.
How in blazes we have a...
Fred, the gasoline!
What about the reserve tanks?
We've been running on reserve.
You mean that's all we...
KHAQQ to Itasca. KHAQQ to Cutter Itasca. We must be right on you but cannot see you. Been unable to reach you by radio. Condition critical. We're running out of fuel. Repeat. We are running out of fuel.
The voices you just heard belong to Amelia Earhart, the great American woman flyer, and Fred Noonan, one of the aviation industry's most experienced navigators. The date was July 3rd, 1937. The place, somewhere between Lai, New Guinea, and Howland Island, a lonely American outpost located far out on the vast stretches of the South Pacific. Together, Earhart and Noonan were undertaking a round-the-world flight at the equator, trying to establish a record for the longest, most difficult journey ever attempted in aviation history. Yet, within mere miles of the refueling stop at Howland, something went wrong. Very wrong. Why? What fateful combination of ill luck arose out there in the South Pacific to prevent those flyers from completing their flight? A flight that had been the dream and desire of Amelia Earhart almost from the time she had first learned to fly. These questions may never be satisfactorily answered, but in order to gain at least some understanding of them, we must go back to an earlier, quieter date in history, when one day in 1920, Amelia persuaded her father to take her to an air show at Los Angeles, California. Afterwards, she begged him to ask one of the pilots how much it might cost to learn to fly. The amount took 23-year-old Amelia Earhart by surprise.
$1,000. Oh, Daddy.
Pretty steep price, if you ask me. Look, honey, why don't you just settle for an airplane ride and get it out of your system? At least we can afford that much anyhow.
Okay, I'll take the ride, Daddy, but I'm not promising anything.
Well, Amelia, how was it? Satisfied now?
Oh, Daddy, it was wonderful. The most exciting thing in the whole world.
Well, good. Now that you've got...
And I've made up my mind. I'm going to learn to fly.
But right before you went up, you...
I said I wouldn't promise anything. Oh, Daddy, I've simply got to learn how.
But, Amelia, flying is something altogether too... Now, look. Never once in all your life have I ever discouraged you from doing the things you wanted to do. And some of those things weren't so easy for me to give my blessings to either. Like letting you quit your senior high school to take that nursing job in that Toronto Army hospital during the war. Or like going into debt last year to send you to that expensive medical school back east. Or like doing my best to understand when you suddenly decided you didn't really want a medical career and then asked to come out here and stay with us for a spell while you did some thinking about your future. I gave my blessings to all those things, Amelia, and I'd do it again if I thought it'd help you. But this time it's different, honey. Flying is a dangerous sport. It's still a brand new field, and it's just not suited to a woman. And the expense, Amelia. If I was a millionaire instead of a railroad attorney, it might be different. But $1,000 is more money than...
But you won't have to spend a nickel of your own money, Daddy.
I what?
You won't have to spend a nickel, not even a penny, because I'm going to pay for those lessons myself.
So Amelia found a job with the telephone company, took the required number of flying lessons to qualify for a pilot's license, bought a plane, and soon became one of the best flyers in the state of California. Before long, however, the desire for new horizons possessed her again, and in time Amelia found another job, this one as a social worker at a school for poor children in the city of Boston. For the next 2 years, the school was her entire existence, until one afternoon in the spring of 1928, she received a mysterious phone call, a call that was to change her whole life.
Yes, this is Amelia Earhart.
Miss Earhart, this is Captain Hilton Rayleigh of United States Army Headquarters here in Boston.
Yes?
I realize you're busy, Miss Earhart, so I'll come straight to the point. Certain people here have advised me that you fly, and that you're interested in the future of the aviation industry. Is that correct?
Well, yes, but I really don't understand what you...
Miss Earhart, have you ever heard of a Mrs. Frederick Guest?
Mrs. Frederick Guest. No, I don't think I...
It happens Mrs. Guest is one of the wealthiest women on the East Coast. Not long ago, she bought a tri-motor aircraft from Admiral Byrd, the famous polar explorer. Her plan was to hire a pilot and mechanic and have them fly her across the Atlantic as a passenger in order to become the first woman in history to make the flight. But her family said it was too dangerous and wouldn't let her go. Well, when this happened, she insisted that another woman go in her place.
With what kind of qualifications?
Someone with flying experience and a fair amount of common sense. Someone fairly typical of young womanhood. Several girls have been interviewed already, Miss Earhart, and we'd like to add your name to the list of candidates, provided you're interested.
Needless to say, Amelia was interested. So interested, in fact, that when she was at last chosen to make the flight, she accepted immediately. Several weeks later, a tri-motor pontooned aircraft sped out of Boston Harbor, gained altitude, and finally pointed its nose northeastward into the dawning May sky. At the controls were the pilot and the navigator. Further back in the cabin sat Amelia Earhart, crouched on the floor between the gas tanks, the narrow, crowded space that was to be her seat all the way to the end of the flight. Sometime later, now high over the wind-tossed, stormy Atlantic, the navigator turned about and raised his voice above the roar of the motors.
We're nearly halfway across now, Amelia. How are you feeling?
Like a sack of potatoes.
Like a what?
A sack of potatoes. You'd feel useless, too, if you couldn't touch a single control all the way over. But things will be different next time.
Next time?
Right. I've just decided I'm going to make this flight again. And when I do, I'll make it alone. Well, my name isn't Amelia Earhart.
Scarcely before the roar of the engines faded from her ears upon the landing of the big tri-motor at Buryport, Wales, Amelia began laying plans for her next airborne adventure. But now, with their difficult ocean crossing behind them, the flyers soon became the center of attention throughout all of Britain, and, in the excitement, Amelia found she had little privacy with which to dream of a second Atlantic flight. Indeed, upon her return to America, Amelia Earhart discovered she had become famous. So famous that for the next several years, she was to have no privacy to plan much of anything, except her marriage in 1931 to George Putnam, a wealthy New York publisher who had helped back her recent Atlantic flight. Now, at last, wealth and fame combined to make Amelia Earhart's fondest wishes come true. In the process, she continued to make worldwide headlines.
America's Amelia Earhart was awarded her country's Distinguished Flying Cross today for becoming the first woman in history to fly the Atlantic Ocean alone. Long good friends of Miss Earhart, the British people extend their warmest congratulations.
Within 3 years of her remarkable solo flight across the Atlantic, Amelia Earhart today became the first woman in history to fly alone from Hawaii to California, USA. We of France salute this courageous accomplishment. Magnifique, mademoiselle. Long may you fly.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. North and South America and all the ships at sea. Let's go to press. Flash. Amelia Earhart, America's sweetheart of the skies, today added still another gold star to her already long list of achievements by becoming the first human in history to fly solo from Los Angeles to Mexico City. Her time, a fantastic 13 hours, 23 minutes. And now, my prediction of the week. Miss Earhart will soon give in to public pressure by releasing the announcement all America is waiting to hear. Her plans to fly completely around the world.
A flight around the world. For Amelia, the realization of a secret ambition of long standing. The one last adventure before putting away the wings of achievement to move into the peace and privacy of richly earned retirement. Now, with the whole nation prodding her on, she could afford to put the adventure off no longer. On February 11th, 1937, Amelia Earhart announced her plans to a waiting world. She would attempt to fly completely around the globe the hard way, at the Earth's equator, a distance of 27,000 sun and storm-swept miles. Later, as reporters from several wire services asked her for details about the coming flight,
Miss Earhart, this twin-engine Lockheed you plan to use, why do you consider it so well-suited to the task of a round-the-world flight?
Well, first of all, it's a darn good ship. But in the year I've owned her, she's been fitted out with enough new equipment to make her about as foolproof a plane as you'll find anywhere. I'm sure she'll handle perfectly once we get underway.
Miss Earhart, you say we. Have you decided then to carry a navigator with you?
Yes, very definitely. It'd be too dangerous otherwise. I'll have my hands full just flying.
Who is he, Miss Earhart?
Noonan. Fred Noonan, with Pan American. He's about as experienced a navigator as you'll find anywhere. Lots of experience.
Since flying around the globe at the equator will involve approximately 27,000 miles, about how many stops do you and Mr. Noonan figure you'll have to make along the way?
We've planned for 30 separate stops for fuel and supplies over the 6-week period we expect to be en route. From the 1st of June to about the first week in July.
Miss Earhart, could you tell us why you're making this flight?
Just quote me as saying, for the fun of it. I love flying. I always have, and I always will. But there's just one good flight left in my system, and this one's going to be it. Anyway, when I finish the job, I mean to give up long-distance flights for good.
Back to the plane again, Miss Earhart. There was a news story leaked out a few days ago about the quality of your aircraft's radio. Now, were the statements in that story true, or...
Yes, I'm afraid they were. The radio is weak, very underpowered. It's rated at only 50 watts with a range just barely over 500 miles. That means it'd be completely useless to me on the long hops, such as the ones we'll be making in the Pacific, for example.
Well, do you plan to replace it with a more powerful model before you leave?
Yes, definitely. So far, I haven't been able to find one, but believe me, I certainly will before the date of the flight.
But Amelia Earhart was not able to find a more suitable radio. Serious as the problem promised to become, however, it seemed to trouble her very little the morning of June 1st, 1937, the date she and Fred Noonan climbed into the big twin-engine Lockheed, rolled down the Miami airport runway, and finally sped into the brightening eastern sky on the first leg of their round-the-world journey by air. For the next several weeks, the flyers found themselves fresh with enthusiasm. But as the miles began to multiply, so did the weariness and the strain. The crossing of 5 continents, the 30 separate stops, and the thousands of miles of wind, rain, thunderstorm, and monsoon eventually left their mark upon them. A mark which soon would contribute to the larger pattern of mistake, confusion, and finally, destruction itself. On July the 3rd, now high above the Pacific Ocean and several thousand miles out from Lae, New Guinea, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan turned their receiver all the way open in hope of catching the homing signals that would guide them to their next refueling stop at Howland Island. But as the miles rushed by, Amelia began to realize how impossible her weak 50-watt radio had made their situation become.
It's no good, Fred. Either we're still too far out to pick up their homing signal or the radio's gone haywire. I don't know which.
At the rate we're losing fuel with all this blasted circling, I'd say our chances of finding the island are less than 1 in 1,000 without those signals.
Unless you can somehow put us back on course.
Look, I'm a navigator, Amelia, not a magician. Like I told you earlier, something must have gone wrong with either my instruments or my calculations during the night. Because according to my figures, we should be directly over Howland Island right now. I just can't see how the blazes I ever...
Don't blame yourself, Fred. Navigational instruments can get fouled up just as easily as radio gear. And so can people when they've had to cope with as much as we have lately. Crazy, isn't it? Here we are with enough flying time between the two of us to make a flight like this one about as simple as flying the Atlantic. So what happens? We come almost all the way around the globe without a single hitch. And now, here we are, circling a patch of ocean for hours, looking for that refueling stop as if it were a needle in a haystack.
It may as well be. A South Pacific island we can't find that's supposed to be less than 3 miles long and half a mile wide, and a Coast Guard cutter with the unlikely name of Itasca parked offshore, sending us homing signals we can't even pick up. How in blazes we ever...
Fred, the gasoline!
What about the reserve tanks?
We've been running on reserve.
You mean that's all we've...
KHAQQ to Itasca. KHAQQ to Cutter Itasca. We must be right on you but cannot see you. Been unable to reach you by radio. Condition critical. We're running out of fuel. Repeat. We are running out of fuel.
This was the last message the world ever received from Amelia Earhart. In spite of the desperate 16-day, 250,000 square mile search that followed, not a single clue was found to establish the fate of the missing aviatrix or of the navigator who shared that fate with her. However Amelia Earhart met that fate, it is certain she met it with courage. For courage had been, during the course of her 39 years, her constant companion. Indeed, from the time she chose to enter the world of aviation and asked nothing of it but the chance to prove that women must strive to be free, to try the things men have tried, she knew that somehow that choice would one day have to be paid for with courage. Amelia Earhart. She was one of America's great pioneers of the air and the world's first sweetheart of the skies.